I was born Grace Elizabeth Harrison, became Grace Thornfield when I married Robert in 1978, and remained that person until 4 weeks ago, the day after we buried him. I'm 71 years old with arthritic hands that still remember how to make the honey wheat rolls my son Tyler used to beg for on Saturday evenings, and the way my daughter Sarah's curls felt when I styled them for school picture day. I'm telling you this so you understand that before everything collapsed, I was simply a mother who believed she had raised decent children. Robert's heart disease took 16 months to kill him, congestive heart failure. The gradual thief that gives you just enough time to arrange your affairs, but not enough time to truly prepare for the emptiness. We kept it quiet at first, just between us. Our children were busy with their own lives. Tyler with his marketing agency in Seattle that seemed to require him to miss every family gathering, and Sarah with her perpetually struggling wellness coaching businesses in Phoenix that somehow always needed another investment from Dad. They don't need this burden yet, Robert had said, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, the medication making his words slightly slurred. Let them live their lives a little longer without this shadow. I nodded because I loved him, but I knew better. I knew our children. When they finally arrived at our modest lakeside home on the outskirts of Clearwater, Michigan, the same house where they'd grown up, where Robert and I had built Thornfield Lavender Farm from 25 acres of unused pasture into one of the most respected organic lavender operations in the Great Lakes region, they didn't come with comfort. They came with questions about the will. "Mom, I'm just trying to be practical," Tyler said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he'd perfected sometime after his first major corporate contract. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Robert asleep upstairs, when he first broached the subject. "The medical bills must be piling up. Have you two considered downsizing? The business can't be easy for you to manage alone." Tyler had left Clearwater at 19, declaring small-town Michigan as limiting as the soil that had paid for his education. He'd visited only when absolutely necessary, usually staying in the local Holiday Inn rather than his childhood bedroom because the lavender scent triggers my migraines. But suddenly, during his father's final weeks, he developed a profound interest in the family business that had embarrassed him throughout his adolescence. Sarah arrived 4 days later, bringing with her 7 suitcases and the scent of expensive failure, 6 wellness ventures in 9 years, each one launched with her father's money, each one abandoned when it required actual work. But she hugged Robert with genuine tears and slept beside his bed the night before he passed, which is why I still struggle with what came after. The funeral was small, just as Robert would have wanted. He was buried on a hillside overlooking the lavender fields where the early summer blooms were just beginning to show their purple. I stood between my children as they lowered him into the ground, Tyler's arms stiff around my shoulders, Sarah openly weeping into a monogrammed handkerchief I'd never seen before. "He's at peace now," the pastor said, and I wondered if that was true, or just something people say when someone dies after long suffering. Robert and I weren't particularly religious, but we'd maintained the social convention of occasional church attendance, enough that Pastor Coleman knew to focus on Robert's love for the land rather than any heavenly reward. What I remember most about that day was the silence afterward. The house echoed with it as people dropped off casseroles and spoke in hushed tones about Robert's kindness, his integrity, how he'd helped Mr. Patterson save his struggling dairy farm during the recession, or employed the Morrison twins when they needed summer work. Nobody mentioned how he'd built our business from nothing while raising 2 children who seemed to have inherited none of his values. I made up the guest rooms. I told Tyler and Sarah that evening as the last visitors left. "I thought we could spend tomorrow going through some of your father's things together." "About that, Mom," Tyler said, setting down his whiskey glass with a precision that reminded me of his father. "Sarah and I have been talking, and we think it's best if we settle things quickly. We both need to get back." "Settle things." "The estate," Sarah clarified, scrolling through her phone. "The house, the business. Tyler and I need to figure out the next steps." I'd expected grief for my children, perhaps some reminiscing about their father. What I got instead was a boardroom meeting. Tyler opened his laptop on the dining table where we'd celebrated their birthdays, their graduations, their departures. "Dad spoke to me about this last year," he said, not meeting my eyes. He was worried about you managing alone. The business needs modernization investment. The house is too much for someone your age. My age. I repeated, the words tasting bitter. I've managed this farm alongside your father for 42 years. And you've done wonderfully, Sarah said in the same voice she used when selling overpriced supplements to desperate women. But it's time to think about your future, Mom. A retirement community would give you friends, activities. I have friends. I have activities. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. This is my home. It's all of our home, Tyler corrected. And Dad left the business to Sarah and me in the will. He wanted us to take care of you, but he knew the business needed younger management. I stared at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes who thought he knew anything about the earth that had fed him, the plants his father had nursed through drought and pests and frost. Show me the will. He slid a document across the table, not our family lawyer's letterhead, but something printed on Tyler's corporate stationery. Robert's signature looked wrong somehow. Too perfect, too steady for a man whose hands had trembled with pain for months. You had him sign this while he was on morphine. The rage that rose in me then was something primal, something I hadn't felt since I watched a raccoon try to get into our chicken coop when the children were small. I'd chased it off with a garden hose and the kind of fury that comes from protecting what's yours. He was lucid, Tyler insisted. He wanted us to have a fresh start with the business. There's a developer interested in the land. Developer? For a luxury housing community, Sarah explained, her eyes bright with the prospect of money. They'll pay $7.8 million, Mom. We can all start fresh. Fresh. As if the life Robert and I had built was something stale, something to be discarded. As if the legacy of Thornfield Lavender Farm, our sustainable farming practices, our refusal to sell to the big corporations that would squeeze our workers, our annual donation of 15% of our crop to local aromatherapy programs for veterans, was nothing compared to the prospect of cookie-cutter homes for wealthy weekenders from Detroit. Your father would never sell this land for development, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I didn't sign anything. You don't need to, Tyler explained with practiced patience. The business was in Dad's name, the house too. Michigan isn't a community property state. I knew then that they had planned this, not just after Robert fell ill, but perhaps before. How long had my son been waiting for his father to die so he could liquidate our life's work? How many times had Sarah called, not to check on Robert's health, but to ensure their plan was still in motion? I need time, I said, standing up. I'm going to bed. We'll discuss this tomorrow. But there would be no discussion. While I lay awake in the bed I'd shared with Robert, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar creaks of our old farmhouse, my children were making their final preparations. Morning came with the smell of coffee, the expensive kind Tyler had brought from Seattle because our local store brand was undrinkable. I dressed slowly, my joints stiff with grief and age and the cold knowledge of what my children had become. When I came downstairs, they were waiting with a small suitcase I didn't recognize. We packed some essentials for you, Sarah said brightly. Tyler and I thought we'd drive you to look at Sunset Manor today. It's a beautiful retirement community just 3 hours from here. I'm not going to any retirement community, I replied, pouring myself coffee. This is my home. Mom, be reasonable, Tyler said. The paperwork is done. We close with the developers next week. You can't stay here. I looked at my son, then really looked at him and saw nothing of Robert in his face. Nothing of the boy who had once followed his father through the lavender rows at dawn, asking endless questions about pruning and harvesting. Nothing but a stranger who saw me as an inconvenience to be managed. I need my medication from the bathroom, I said quietly. And I'd like to take some photos. Sure, Mom, Sarah agreed, relief evident in her voice. Take whatever personal items you want. We can send the rest later. I moved through my home one last time, touching the worn banister Robert had sanded and revarnished every 6 years, the quilt my grandmother had made that draped across our bed, the window seat where I'd read stories to my children on snowy afternoons. In the bathroom, I retrieved my medications, but also slipped my passport and birth certificate from the hidden compartment in the medicine cabinet. the one Robert had built when we first worried about break-ins in the late 90s. In our bedroom closet, behind Robert's collection of flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of lavender and aftershave, I retrieved the small fireproof box containing the one thing my children didn't know about. When I came downstairs, my purse heavier but my heart somehow lighter with resolve, Tyler was checking his watch. "Ready?" he asked, not really a question. I nodded, allowing Sarah to take my arm as if I were already the infirm old woman they wanted me to be. We drove in Tyler's rental car, a sleek black BMW with leather seats that stuck to the backs of my legs. I watched my home disappear through the rear window, memorizing the sight of summer blooms on the lavender plants, the weathered red of our processing barn, the stone chimney Robert had rebuilt the summer before Tyler was born. We drove past Clearwater's small downtown, past the elementary school where I'd volunteered, past the community center where I still taught herb gardening on Thursday evenings. But instead of continuing on the highway toward the larger towns where retirement communities clustered, Tyler turned onto County Road 15, a rural route that cut through farmland before eventually connecting to the interstate. 25 minutes later, he pulled onto the shoulder beside an empty field. The engine idled as he turned to look at me. "This is where you get off, Mom," he said, his voice eerily calm. "The house and business are mine now." "What?" Sarah at least had the decency to look confused. "Tyler, what are you doing?" "What we discussed," he snapped. "Mom's not going to make this easy. She'll contest the will, make scenes, embarrass us with the developer. This is cleaner. But she has her medication, some clothes. There's a gas station about 6 miles up. She can call one of her herb garden friends." He reached across me to open my door. "Get out, Mom." I looked at my son, searching for any sign of the child I'd loved, and found nothing. Then I turned to my daughter, whose wide eyes darted between us, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Sarah?" I asked, but I already knew she'd go along with him. She always had. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "It's just, we need this money. I have debts." I nodded once, gathered my purse and the small suitcase they'd packed, and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The summer air was warm, scented with fresh earth and the promise of thunderstorms later. I stood there clutching my bag as Tyler drove away, without looking back, Sarah's pale face visible through the rear window until they crested a hill and disappeared. No phone, no money, or so they thought. Just my name and what they didn't know I still owned. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I was free. Free from pretending these people deserved my love simply because I had given them life. Free from the weight of maternal obligation to children who saw me as nothing but an obstacle. I started walking, not toward the gas station Tyler had mentioned, but toward a future they couldn't imagine. In my purse was my passport, my medication, and a deed. The original deed to 25 acres of land in my maiden name, purchased before I married Robert, before Thornfield Lavender Farm expanded. The most profitable 25 acres as it happened, which included water rights that any developer would need. My children thought they'd left me with nothing. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The walk to town took nearly 3 hours. My shoes, sensible flats I'd worn for my husband's funeral, weren't made for country roads. By the time I reached Jensen's Market at the edge of Clearwater, my feet were blistered and the afternoon sun had burned my neck. I didn't care. Pain has a way of clarifying things, and with each step, my purpose had crystallized. I didn't go inside immediately. Instead, I sat on the bench outside, watching trucks and sedans come and go, normal people living normal lives who had no idea that Grace Thornfield, who judged their preserves at the county fair for 25 years, had just been abandoned like roadkill by her own children. "Mrs. Thornfield?" I looked up to see Carl Jensen himself, fourth-generation owner of the store, wiping his hands on his apron. "You all right? You're looking a bit peaked." "Just resting, Carl. Been a long day." He nodded, glancing at my suitcase. "Real sorry about Robert. He was a good man." "Yes, he was." I straightened my spine. "Carl, could I use your phone? I seem to have forgotten mine." "Of course you can." He led me inside, past the produce section and craft beer display, to the small office behind the counter. Take your time. I didn't call any of my herb garden friends, as Tyler had suggested. I called Marcus Bellwether, our family lawyer of 35 years. Grace, I tried reaching you yesterday. I was surprised not to see you at the reading. My hand tightened on the receiver. What reading? Marcus was silent for a moment. The will reading. Your son presented a document, but I had concerns. I've been trying to contact you. I've been indisposed, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Marcus, I need your help. And I need discretion. You have both. My office, 2 hours. I'll be here. I bought a cheap prepaid phone with cash I kept hidden in a compartment of my purse. Emergency money Robert had insisted we both carry after getting stranded with a flat tire years ago. I also purchased a bottle of water and a sandwich I had no appetite for. Carl refused to take my money. On the house, Grace. You need anything else, you just ask. His kindness nearly broke me. Nearly. But I hadn't cried when they lower Robert into the ground, and I wouldn't cry now. Marcus's law office occupied the second floor of a Victorian on Main Street. When his secretary saw me, her eyes widened. Mrs. Thornfield, Mr. Bellwether is expecting you. She hurried from behind her desk. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'm fine, Janet. Thank you. Marcus met me at his office door, his tall frame stooped with age, but his eyes sharp as ever. He'd been 2 years behind Robert in school, had handled our business incorporation, our wills, everything legal in our lives. Grace. He guided me to a leather chair, then sat not behind his desk but in the chair beside me. Tell me what's happening.
So I did.
The conversation after the funeral, the suspicious will, the drive and abandonment. With each detail, Marcus's expression darkened. The will they showed you, he said when I finished, was not the will Robert and I prepared last year. Their document is a forgery. I suspected as much. I opened my purse and removed the fireproof box. From it, I withdrew the deed to the original 25 acres. They don't know about this. Marcus examined the deed, nodding slowly. Smart. Very smart. You two were always thinking ahead. Robert suggested putting this portion in my maiden name when we first expanded. Insurance, he called it, in case the business ever failed. And now it's insurance of another kind. Marcus placed the deed carefully on his desk. What do you want to do, Grace? I met his eyes. I want my home back. I want the business my husband built. And I want my children to understand exactly what they've done. Marcus didn't flinch at the coldness in my voice. Instead, he nodded. Let's start with a place for you to stay tonight. My sister's B&B has a vacancy. Tomorrow, we'll begin the legal work.
No.
I shook my head. I need to move faster than that. The developer is closing next week. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. You're not planning to just go through the courts. Courts are for people with time, Marcus. I have a better idea. But first, I had an unexpected visitor to deal with. As Marcus and I were discussing strategy, Janet knocked on the door. Mr. Bellwether? There's a woman here claiming to be Mrs. Thornfield's daughter. She seems quite upset. My heart sank as Sarah burst into the office, her mascara streaked, her hair disheveled.
Mom.
Oh my God, we've been looking everywhere for you. She rushed toward me, but I held up a hand to stop her. I asked coldly. Tyler's back at the house, calling hospitals, the police. We thought something terrible had happened when we couldn't find you at the gas station. Something terrible did happen, I replied evenly. Your brother abandoned me on the side of the road. Sarah's face crumpled. I know it was wrong. I tried to stop him, but he said it was the only way. He said you'd understand eventually, that it was for your own good. For my own good? The words came out sharper than I intended. Leaving me stranded with no phone, no money, was for my own good. Tyler said you had money, that you'd be fine. Tyler lied. About the money, about the will, about everything. I turned to Marcus. Show her. Marcus slid a copy of Robert's real will across his desk. Sarah's eyes widened as she read. This, This isn't what Tyler showed me. He said Dad left everything to us, that you'd be taken care of, but that we needed to manage things. Your brother forged a will, I said, watching her face carefully. The question is, did you know?
No.
I swear I didn't know. I thought. She collapsed into a chair, the full weight of what had happened finally hitting her. Oh God, what have we done? For a moment, just a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers, who cried when her goldfish died, who believed in fairy tales and happy endings. Then I remembered the cold calculation in her eyes when she talked about starting fresh with $7.8 million. What you've done, I said quietly, is show me exactly who you really are. Mom, please. I can fix this. I'll talk to Tyler, make him understand. It's too late for that, Sarah. Marcus here has already begun the process of having you both arrested for fraud. Arrested? Her voice rose to a near shriek. But I didn't know about the will. You knew enough, I replied. You knew I didn't want to sell. You knew I wasn't consulted about any of this. And you went along with it anyway, because you needed the money. Sarah began to sob, dramatic, heaving cries I'd heard countless times when she didn't get her way. But this time, they didn't move me. There might be a way to avoid criminal charges, Marcus said carefully, looking at me for permission to continue. I nodded. If you and your brother signed documents acknowledging the will was fraudulent and renouncing all claims to the business and property. Yes. Sarah said immediately. Yes, we'll do that. I'll make Tyler understand. There's more, I interrupted. You both leave Clearwater. Tonight. And you never contact me again. Mom, you can't mean that. I mean every word. I stood, gathering my purse. You made your choice on County Road 15. Now I'm making mine. That night, in the floral-papered comfort of Rosewood bed and breakfast, I made my first call, not to my children, who could wonder where I was, whether I'd reached town or collapsed on the roadside. My call was to Patricia Winters, the regional manager of Great Lakes Community Bank, where Thornfield Lavender Farm had done business for decades. Mrs. Thornfield, I'm so sorry about your husband. Thank you, Patricia. I'm calling because I've discovered some concerning transactions, and I need your help to protect what's left of our business. My second call was to Dennis Crawford, the agricultural extension agent who'd worked with us for 18 years. Grace, I was at the funeral but didn't get to speak with you. I know it's been chaotic. It has been, Dennis. Listen, I need information about a potential development on farmland in the county. My third call was to Elena Rodriguez, editor of the Clearwater Tribune and Robert's third cousin. Grace, how are you holding up? I've been worried. I'm managing, Elena. But I think there's a story you might be interested in about developers, protected agricultural land, and inheritance fraud. By midnight, I had made 9 calls, each one a strand in the web I was weaving. Outside my window, the quiet streets of Clearwater slept peacefully, unaware that Grace Thornfield, always the peacemaker, always the nurturer, was planning war. In the morning, I met Marcus at his office with a legal pad full of notes. I need you to freeze the business accounts, I told him. And I need you to file an emergency injunction on any sale of the property based on the fraudulent will. Marcus reviewed my notes, his eyebrows rising. This is comprehensive. I had 42 years with Robert. I know every contract, every client, every detail of that business. I leaned forward, and I'm going to use all of it. Your children won't take this quietly. I'm counting on it. By noon, the pieces were in motion. Marcus had filed the emergency injunction. Patricia had frozen the business accounts pending investigation of suspicious activity. Dennis had contacted the Environmental Board about protected wetlands on the proposed development site, wetlands that happened to be on my 25 acres. I sat in Marcus's office, watching the clock tick toward 2 p.m. when my children would discover that their carefully constructed plan had hit its first obstacle. My phone rang, the new prepaid one whose number they shouldn't have known, but Marcus had made sure they'd gotten it. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my voice calm. This is Grace. Mom. Tyler's voice crackled with barely contained fury. What have you done? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I've only just begun. Mom, be reasonable. Tyler's voice hardened through the phone. You can't just freeze accounts and file injunctions. Do you have any idea what you're doing to our deal? Your deal, I corrected. Not mine. Not your father's. Where are you? Sarah cut in, her voice shrill. Tyler had clearly put me on speaker. We've been worried sick. The lie hung between us, like a poison cloud. They hadn't called the police, hadn't contacted friends. They'd been too busy finalizing their betrayal. Worried that I survived? I asked, my voice perfectly level. Or worried that I didn't conveniently disappear? That's not fair, Sarah whined. Tyler made a mistake, she started. Shut up, Sarah, Tyler snapped. I smiled into the phone. Already fracturing. Listen carefully. I'm giving you one chance to walk away with something. Withdraw your fraudulent will, sign the business and house back to me. In return, I'll give you each a one-time payment of $75,000. After that, we're done. Tyler laughed, an ugly sound. You're delusional. You have nothing. The will is legal. The will is a forgery, Marcus interjected, leaning toward the speaker phone on his desk. As the lawyer who drafted Robert Thornfield's actual will, I can testify to that. Silence stretched across the line. You have 24 hours, I said. After that, the offer expires and I proceed with fraud charges. I hung up before they could respond. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You realize they'll probably refuse. I'm counting on it. I stood, gathering my purse. Now I need to visit the bank in person. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet meetings in back offices throughout Clearwater. People who had known me for decades, known us, Robert and me, stepped up with information, signatures, and support. Not out of pity, but out of respect, and perhaps a touch of relish at seeing the Thornfield children, who had abandoned their hometown for shinier places, get their comeuppance. By evening, I'd moved into a small apartment above Mitchell's coffee shop. The owner, Susan Mitchell, had been my friend since our children started kindergarten together. Stay as long as you need, she said, pressing the key into my palm. That boy of yours never did right by this town, or by you and Robert. I slept surprisingly well that night, lulled by the familiar smells of coffee and pastry rising from below. In the morning, I dressed in clothes Susan had lent me, a pair of jeans and a blouse that fit well enough, and prepared for war. At precisely 9 a.m., when the recorder's office opened, I filed paperwork asserting my ownership of the original 25 acres, property that included the main house, the processing barn, and most critically, the water access that any developer would need. At 10 a.m., I met with the Agricultural Board about conservation easements Robert and I had quietly put in place years ago, restrictions that would make development nearly impossible, even if Tyler somehow managed to sell. At noon, I sat with Elena in the Clearwater Tribune office, providing documentation for a story headlined, Local Lavender Farm at Center of Inheritance Dispute. Developer plans threaten protected agricultural land. By 2 p.m., my phone was ringing again. The offer's off the table, I said by way of greeting. Mom, you're making a terrible mistake. Tyler's voice had lost its edge of superiority, replaced by something closer to panic. The developer's lawyers are threatening to sue if we can't deliver as promised. That sounds like your problem. Our problem, Sarah broke in. Mom, please. I used the advance to pay off some debts. If this falls through, I'll be ruined. You should have thought of that before leaving me on the side of the road. That was Tyler's idea, she cried. I didn't know until we were already driving. The betrayal between them gave me no satisfaction. Nothing about this gave me satisfaction. Only a cold, necessary sense of justice being served. The bank statements show you withdrew $75,000 4 days before your father's funeral, Sarah. I kept my voice clinical, detached. Planning your fresh start already, were you? She began to sob, dramatic, heaving cries I'd heard countless times when she didn't get her way. It's too late for tears, I continued. Marcus will send over the paperwork. You both sign, renouncing all claims to Thornfield Lavender Farm and the house. In return, I won't press charges for fraud, attempted elder abuse, and theft. And the $75,000? Tyler asked, his businessman's mind still calculating. That offer expired, I replied. You get to stay out of jail. That's all. I hung up, set down the phone, and stared out the window of Marcus's office at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. Across the street, the farmers' market was setting up, just as it did every Saturday. People moved about their business, greeting neighbors, examining produce, living normal lives where children didn't abandon mothers on roadsides. They'll fight, Marcus said, setting a cup of tea beside me. Let them. I didn't touch the tea. I have one more call to make. I dialed a number I'd memorized decades ago but rarely used. Jonathan? It's Grace Thornfield. I think it's time I called in that favor. Jonathan Walsh had been Robert's roommate at Michigan State before either of them met me. They'd remained friends even after Jonathan moved to Grand Rapids to start what would become one of the largest environmental law firms in the Midwest. 35 years ago, Robert had loaned Jonathan money when his first practice collapsed, money that helped rebuild a firm now known for destroying predatory developers. Grace. His voice was warm with recognition. I've been meaning to call since I heard about Robert. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Jonathan. I need your help with a situation. I explained everything, the forgery, the abandonment, the developer. Jonathan listened without interruption, and when I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. I'll be in Clearwater tomorrow morning, he finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. These developers, Platinum Shores, they've been on our radar. What they're planning violates at least 8 environmental regulations. We've been looking for a way to stop them. And now you have one. Yes. I could hear him shuffling papers. Don't sign anything before I get there. And Grace, I'm sorry about your children. I stopped having children 4 days ago, I replied. Now I just have adversaries. That night I sat in Susan's kitchen as she closed the coffee shop, drinking tea and watching her prepare pastries for the morning. You should try to eat something, she said, nodding toward the sandwich she'd made me. You need your strength. I'm not hungry. I hadn't had an appetite since Robert died. Food was fuel now, nothing more. Heard Sarah's staying at the Hampton Inn, Susan said, kneading dough with practice movements. Tyler's still at the house. People are talking. Let them talk. The small-town grapevine had always annoyed my children, but now it served me. Every move they made I knew about within hours. Elena's article runs tomorrow, Susan continued. Front page. Got a call from the Detroit Free Press, too. They want to pick up the story, something about the developer having trouble with other projects. I nodded, unsurprised. Jonathan's call had confirmed what I'd suspected. Platinum Shores had a pattern of targeting vulnerable landowners, particularly the elderly, with promises they never intended to keep. Did I do the right thing, raising them the way we did? The question slipped out before I could stop it, not sentimentality, but genuine curiosity about where I had failed. Susan's hands stilled in the dough. You and Robert were good parents, Grace. Some people just turn out rotten, no matter the soil they're planted in. I accepted her answer with a nod, pushing away the useless question. It didn't matter anymore. The past was buried with Robert. Only the future, and my revenge, remained. Morning brought Jonathan Walsh, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 4 months of Thornfield farm profits, striding into Marcus's office with 3 associates trailing behind him. Grace. He embraced me briefly, then immediately turned to business. We've filed injunctions against Platinum Shores in 5 counties already. Now we add yours to the list. For the next 3 hours, I watched a master at work. Jonathan didn't just understand law. He wielded it like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and devastating. By noon, he had drafted documents that would not only block the sale but potentially trigger a federal investigation into the developer. Your children's signatures, he said, sliding papers across Marcus's desk. We need them to officially renounce their claims based on the fraudulent will. Marcus says they're refusing. They'll sign, I said with certainty. They just need the proper motivation. I pulled out my phone and made another call, this one to Angela Winters, the assistant district attorney for the county and Patricia's daughter. Angela, it's Grace Thornfield. I'd like to discuss pressing criminal charges. Jonathan raised an eyebrow but said nothing as I arranged a meeting for later that afternoon. When I hung up, he nodded approvingly. You always were tougher than Robert gave you credit for. Robert knew exactly how tough I was. I corrected. He just never thought I'd need to use it against our own children. Just after 3 p.m., my phone rang again. Tyler, his voice clipped and formal. We'll sign the papers. But we want something in writing saying you won't pursue charges. I already offered that yesterday. The terms have changed. What do you want? He sounded defeated, which gave me no pleasure. Be at Marcus's office at 5 p.m. Bring Sarah. I'll lay out my terms then. When they arrived, I was already seated between Jonathan and Marcus, a united front of legal firepower. My children looked terrible, Tyler unshaven, his expensive shirt wrinkled, Sarah with smeared makeup and hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Neither could meet my eyes. Sit, I said, gesturing to the chairs across from us. This won't take long. Jonathan slid the documents across the table. Mrs. Thornfield has agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the forged will, fraud, elder abuse, and attempted theft of business assets worth approximately $13.2 million. In exchange, you will both sign these papers acknowledging the will was fraudulent, renouncing all claims to Thornfield Lavender Farm, the residential property, and all associated assets. Tyler skimmed the document, his face paling. This says we forfeit our inheritance entirely. Yes, I said simply. But that's, Sarah began. Exactly what you tried to do to me, I finished for her. With one difference. I'm offering you a legal way out, not abandonment on a roadside. Mom, please, Sarah's voice cracked. I know we made a terrible mistake, but… Stop. I held up my hand. This isn't a negotiation. Sign, or I walk across the street to the DA's office and file charges. Angela Winters is waiting for my call. At the mention of the assistant district attorney, Tyler's already pale face went ashen. He knew Angela from high school, another local girl he'd looked down on who had now surpassed him. You'd really do that? Send your own children to jail? There was genuine disbelief in his voice, as if the woman who had made his favorite cookies and bandaged his childhood scrapes couldn't possibly be this cold, this unforgiving. The woman who would have forgiven you anything died on County Road 15, I replied evenly. You left her in the dust. Tyler looked away first, then reached for the pen Marcus offered. His signature was shaky, but legible. Sarah took longer, tears dropping onto the paper as she signed her name. What happens now? She asked in a small voice. Now you leave Clearwater, I said, gathering the signed documents. Both of you.
Today.
If I see either of you in this town again, I will press charges regardless of what you've signed. And the developer? Tyler asked, a last attempt at salvaging something. Jonathan smiled thinly. Platinum Shores will be formally notified that the property is not and was never for sale. They'll also be receiving notification of our intent to file suit for their part in what appears to be a conspiracy to defraud a widow. They left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched through Marcus's window as they walked separately to their cars, Tyler to his rental, Sarah to her flashy blue convertible that Robert had helped her buy last year. Neither looked back at the office. Neither looked at each other. It's done, Marcus said quietly, placing the documents in his safe. But it wasn't done. Not yet. The legal battle was won, but the war, my war, had one final act. I need a ride, I told Jonathan. Where to? Home. The Thornfield farmhouse looked exactly as I'd left it 5 days earlier. White clapboard siding glowing in the late afternoon sun. Robert's rocking chair still on the front porch where he'd spent his last mobile days watching the lavender fields bloom. Only Tyler's rental car in the driveway marked any change. Want me to come in with you? Jonathan asked as he pulled up behind it.
No.
This part one do alone. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. I moved through the first floor, noting small disturbances, Tyler's laptop on the dining table, a half-empty whiskey glass beside it, muddy shoes by the door that he would never have left there when he lived here. Tyler, I called out, my voice echoing through the rooms that had witnessed 42 years of my life. No answer. I climbed the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister Robert had carved by hand our first year in the house. At the top, I noticed our bedroom door ajar, light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open. Tyler stood by the window, staring out at the lavender fields, his back to me. The room had been ransacked, dresser drawers pulled out, closet doors open, Robert's possessions scattered across the bed we'd shared for 4 decades. Looking for something? I asked coldly. He didn't startle, didn't turn around. I know there has to be more. Dad wouldn't leave everything to you. Your father trusted me. Something you clearly never learned to do. Now he did turn, his face twisted with something between rage and desperation. You've destroyed everything. The deal's collapsed. Sarah's creditors are calling. My agency is investigating why I took so much time off without explanation. Actions have consequences, I replied simply. Is that what this is? A lesson? He laughed bitterly. Always the teacher, even now. Not a lesson, I corrected. Justice. I moved to the bookshelf and pulled out an old leather-bound copy of Thoreau's Walden, Robert's favorite book, the one he'd read aloud to me during long winter evenings when the children were asleep. From between its pages, I withdrew a sealed envelope. Your father wrote this for you the week before he died. I was going to give it to you after the funeral, before I understood what you really were. Tyler reached for it, but I held it back. Did you even grieve for him? Or were you too busy planning how to profit from his death? Something flashed across his face, perhaps shame, perhaps just annoyance at being caught. I loved Dad. You loved what he provided, I corrected. Security. Status. The safety net for your riskier ventures. What was it this time, Tyler? Another bad investment? Gambling debts. His silence was answer enough. Your father built something that would have sustained generations if you'd had the patience to nurture it. I placed the envelope on the dresser. Instead, you tried to sell it for quick cash. The lavender business is dying, he snapped. Dad was too stubborn to see it, too tied to outdated ways. The development would have made you rich. While destroying everything your father valued, I finished. Everything I valued. You could have had a comfortable retirement, a condo in Florida, no worries. Except the worry of living with the knowledge that I'd allowed my husband's legacy to be bulldozed for vacation homes. Tyler shook his head, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Even now, he couldn't understand. Take the letter and go, I said. Read it or don't. But either way, this is the last time you'll set foot in this house. He snatched the envelope and pushed past me without another word. I listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the slam of the front door, the engine of his rental car roaring to life. Only when the sound had faded completely did I allow myself to sit on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the wreckage of Tyler's final violation. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since that moment on County Road 15 when I realized my children had become strangers. Instead, I began to put the room back in order, folding Robert's flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him, gathering scattered photographs, restoring order to the chaos my son had left behind. But there was one more surprise waiting for me. As I was organizing Robert's papers, I found something I hadn't expected, a manila envelope with my name on it in Robert's handwriting, hidden beneath a stack of farming journals. Inside was a letter dated just 2 weeks before he died, along with bank statements I'd never seen. My dearest Grace, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered what I've been keeping from you. I'm sorry for the secrecy, but I wanted to protect you from one more burden during my illness. I knew about Tyler's debts. I knew about Sarah's failures. I've been watching them circle like vultures for months, waiting for me to die so they could sell our life's work. So I took precautions. The account statements you'll find here show a separate fund I've been building for 20 years, money set aside from our best harvests, invested carefully. It's in your name alone, Grace. $2.3 million that they know nothing about. Use it to fight them if you must. Use it to rebuild if they succeed in taking everything else. But most importantly, use it to live the life we always dreamed of, traveling, seeing the world, experiencing things beyond these lavender fields. You were always stronger than you knew, my love. I have no doubt you'll emerge victorious from whatever battles await. Forever yours, Robert. P.S. Check the loose board under the window seat in our bedroom. There's something else there for you. My hands shaking, I hurried to the window seat where I'd read stories to my children so many years ago. The board Robert mentioned was indeed loose. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small wooden box. Inside the box was a key and another note. Storage Unit 247, Clearwater Mini Storage. Our real treasure. As darkness fell, I moved to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, carrying it to the front porch, where I settled into Robert's rocking chair. Above me, stars began to emerge in the clear summer sky. Below, the lavender fields stretched into darkness, the plants we'd nurtured together now mature and strong. My phone chimed with a text from Susan. Front page again.
Thought you'd want to see.
The attached image showed the Detroit Free Press business section. Platinum Shore's CEO indicted in fraud scheme. The subheading mentioned Thornfield Lavender Farm as the case that had triggered the investigation, ultimately revealing a pattern of elder exploitation spanning 4 states. I set the phone aside, feeling nothing but quiet satisfaction. Justice, not revenge, though perhaps they were the same thing after all. Another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. Mom, please. It's been months.
Can we talk? S.
I deleted it without replying, just as I deleted the 15 before it. Sarah had begun reaching out after the scandal broke, after her creditors took her car, her condo, everything she owned to cover debts she'd accumulated expecting the windfall from the farm sale. Tyler never contacted me at all, though Marcus heard he'd been forced to close his agency when his connection to the fraud investigation came to light. My children were learning the hardest lesson of all, that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. As darkness settled over the lavender fields, I rocked gently, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, a distant owl, the creak of the chair against weathered boards. In my lap lay a notebook where I'd begun sketching plans for Thornfield Lavender Farm's future, a farm-to-table restaurant in the old barn, educational programs for local schools, expansion of our organic practices. Robert would have loved these ideas. We'd discussed similar dreams before his illness consumed our conversations with treatments and pain management. I'm doing it, Robert, I whispered to the night air. Everything we planned. Everything they tried to destroy. Tomorrow I would meet with the lawyer handling the formation of the Robert Thornfield Agricultural Scholarship, a fund for local students pursuing sustainable farming, funded by the money my children had tried to steal. Next week I would host the first community harvest dinner, inviting the neighbors and friends who had rallied around me when I needed them most. And in the quiet evenings, I would sit here in Robert's chair, watching over the lavender fields we had built, the legacy that would continue without our children, strong and enduring as the plants themselves. Not alone after all, just free. 6 months later, I sat in the same chair, watching the autumn sun set over fields ready for their final harvest of the year. The restaurant had opened to rave reviews. The scholarship fund had awarded its first grants. And I had something else to smile about. The storage unit Robert had left me contained more than just sentimental treasures. Along with photo albums and keepsakes was a detailed business plan he'd been developing, a vision for expanding Thornfield Lavender into a destination farm, complete with a boutique hotel, spa services, and artisanal product lines. With the $2.3 million he'd secretly saved and the additional insurance money that had finally been released, I was making his dreams reality. The construction crews had broken ground on the inn just last week. But the sweetest victory came in a phone call I received that morning. Mrs. Thornfield? This is Detective Martinez with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I wanted to update you on the Platinum Shores case. Of course. Thanks to your courage in coming forward, we've uncovered a conspiracy that defrauded elderly landowners out of more than $150 million across 6 states. The CEO and 3 associates are facing federal charges. You've helped us prevent dozens of other families from experiencing what you went through. I'm glad something good came from it. There's more. The court has ordered full restitution to all victims. Based on the attempted purchase of your property, you're entitled to compensation. The check should arrive within the week. How much? $1.7 million, Mrs. Thornfield. Plus interest. I smiled, looking out at the lavender fields Robert and I had built from nothing. Detective Martinez? I know exactly what I'm going to do with that money. That's my story. Some of you might judge me harsh, unforgiving. Some might call it cruelty to cut off my own flesh and blood so completely. But remember what I told you at the beginning. Betrayal from those you've carried in your heart is a wound that transforms you. It burns away sentimentality and leaves something harder, clearer in its place. My children made their choice that day on County Road 15. I made mine every day after. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Maybe share what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven, or would you, like me, have chosen justice instead? Either way, remember this. Some people mistake kindness for weakness until they discover too late what strength truly looks like.